Good morning, councillors and managers and members of the public who is here today. I'd like to open the Environment Community Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and also be live streamed. Also, I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. We do have one apology, so Mayor Antonio, well, not an apology, but he will be late to the meeting today, so not present at the moment, so we can mark that. But as I said, as there are no items in the Environment Community Committee, the only thing I'd just mention, I think an opportunity obviously to again acknowledge those involved with the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers, and that being obviously the staff that lead it, and obviously all the volunteers involved with it, suppliers, obviously everyone that helps make the event what it is, and of course as well to the general public, the residents who came along to be a part of the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers this week or last week. Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers was awarded a silver at the Tourism Queensland Awards, so probably a good opportunity just to highlight and acknowledge that. And on that note, I'll close the Environment Community Committee meeting for the month of November and hand over to Finance and Business Strategy.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thanks very much, Councillor O'Shea. Welcome, councillors. Welcome to the Finance and Business Strategy Committee meeting for November. This meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed. Thank you all for your attendance here today. We'll cover off on perhaps a late arrival when we get to item 2, but can I begin by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka Guyabal peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions, bold ambitions of Australia's first people. Can I acknowledge the portfolio lead, Councillor Shine, for this committee. Also our General Manager, Finance and Business, Anne-Marie Johnson, CEO Brian, other staff that are in the room, welcome to you, and for all those many watching at home and in the gallery here today, thank you very much for your attendance as well. Item number 2 is the apologies, leave of absence and declaration of conflict of interest. We do have, Councillor O'Shea mentioned at the previous committee, the Mayor is at another appointment on behalf of Council this morning and is due to arrive about 10:15, so there's no need to record an apology at this stage, Kirsten, I would imagine, and it will just be a slightly late arrival. We do have leave of absence which will be recorded at the ordinary meeting, so you might turn your minds to that for next week. However, the declarations, pardon me, conflicts of interest, of which there are none mentioned at this stage, but certainly if something crops up through the course of the items, feel free to raise that personally, or if you think someone else, another councillor might have a conflict, then certainly raise that as well, as is our obligation. So councillors, we move then to item number 3, which is the media policy, and I'd invite Brendan Steinert to come forward, and Kylie Delrain, and also invite our General Manager Anne-Marie just to introduce the item, and then perhaps hand over to Brendan if required.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So effective media management is fundamental to Council's ability to inform the community of our decisions, services and projects in a transparent and timely manner. The media policy provides organisational guidance about how and when to interact with the media and the appropriate delegation for authority to speak on behalf of Council. In February this year, Council has requested a workshop to review the policy. A councillor information session was subsequently held in September. The document presented here today reflects those discussions held, and as the Chair said, Brendan and Kylie are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor, is there any questions in regard to the media policy? Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Thanks, Anne-Marie. So when councillors requested this review, it was because we really wanted to make sure that it was an equitable policy, because there's been 11 of us that have been elected by the community, and therefore it is fair and right that 11 of us are heard from by the community. But reading the changes in this policy, how has that equity piece been addressed with any of the changes?
Might hand over to Brendan. Would you like to make a comment on that? Thank you.
Thanks to the council. Thank you for that. I guess in terms of equity, the policy is meant to reflect the council's structure. So in terms of portfolio spokespeople. So I know at that information session we talked about opportunities for councillors and where we believe there may have been inequities. And following that, we've had some follow-up discussions with the relevant general managers and managers in that section to look at how we can rework those areas.
Thanks for that, Brendan. I think that it's going to be one that we're going to have to really hold the line on constantly, because if that's not reflected in the policy, then we probably will need to expect to continue to look at and have those reviews of how many times a councillor is the spokesperson for the council, and just we're going to have to really hold steady on that equity piece to make sure that everybody is actually heard from, because I can understand that the portfolio structure, your point about the portfolio structure, but it is important that the community hears from all of us, because that's democracy. And we're also going to have to really hold steady on making sure that there isn't politicisation of policies in council, because that's not the intended purpose of a policy either.
Thanks, Councillor Vonhoff. Are we clear on those? I think that's certainly the conversations that have seemed to have been had post the information session as well. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Shine?
Yeah, just a technical one by showing my ignorance, but looking at item 10 in the report revision history, it's got the policy version approval date. Could you tell me what DM reference refers to?
It's not document management, I would suggest would be just a DM.
Just a filing thing?
It's a filing, yeah, it's a procedural type manner, document management.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It's okay. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor McMahon, you're happy to move. Do you have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shine. Any debate required to go into? If not, we'll put the motion. The motion before you is as read, to provide where it is down there, just behind your bottle there. That the revised 2.35 media policy attachment 1 be adopted. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Kylie and Brendan. Thank you very much. Councillors, we move then to item number 4, pardon me, which is the 2022-23 operational plan first quarter. I invite Dave Quinlan and Troy Beecham to come forward and perhaps hand straight over to David to introduce, and then perhaps we'll hand over to Troy for some deeper diving, and then we can, we've got general managers in the room to ask questions where or if need be. I'll hand over to you, Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Good morning, councillors. Today we are presenting the operational plan progress report for the first quarter of 22-23. As the Chair alluded, while I've made this report for 21-22, Troy has been preparing these reports for some time now and is currently acting in a principal role. So we'll have Troy report on the detail today. Just a quick comment in relation to some of the macro issues that Council continues to face that will probably be no real surprise to Council. We still have some issues with supply chain issues. We do have inflation of costs in some areas. The employment market continues to be quite competitive and we are holding a number of vacancies. COVID is something we still need to be mindful of. We are, as an organisation, taking a rather, I think, reasonable approach to people who exhibit flu-like symptoms in the workplace, and we are asking people to stay at home should they have symptoms. The ops plan represents stretch targets, quite understandably. The councillors would be aware of the access they have to our reporting material through Power BI, which enables councillors to view our progress on a monthly basis. In saying that, there's absolutely no reduction to the format and extent of the quarterly report, which remains the same as it has been. We have the additional benefit of Power BI providing information to councillors each month. But with that, Mr Chair, I'd like to hand over to Troy.
Thank you, David. Welcome, Troy. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mayor, councillors, and I acknowledge the general managers and officers in the room. Today, I present the 2022-2023 first quarter July to September operational plan progress update. Council adopted the 2022-23 operational plan at a special meeting of Council on the 13th of June 2022. Council is required to adopt and report against operational plan under section 174 of the Local Government Regulation 2012. It is always important to highlight that the operational plan forms part of Council's corporate performance management system and directly demonstrates the delivery of the 2019 to 2024 corporate plan and aligns to the delivery of the annual budget. This report also presents an opportunity to advise Council on continuous improvement and appropriate commentary reflected. On page 3 of the report, the results to date of achievement of delivery of actions delivered by services of Council are sound, with 96% of actions on track and monitor. Page 6 of the report, measuring success of the actions, delivering qualitative and quantitative other KPIs with an achievement of 74% on track or monitor. This number is reflective of present challenges of wet weather events and supply chain issues affecting delivery of majorly construction and maintenance capital programs. The vacancy rate has also affected the delivery of these KPIs. Officers continue to monitor and adjust delivery in accordance with approved plans. I refer you to attachments 7 and 8 for consideration of changes to the Community Development, Facilities and Tourism branch and Strategic Planning and Development branch operational plan deliverables. There are 6 attachments of progress updates. Number 1, Office of the CEO. 2, ECS. 3, Finance Business Strategy. 4, Infrastructure Services. 5, Plan Development Services. And 6, Water and Waste Services. Attachment number 7 and 8, as discussed, was the CDF&T and SPED changes. It is also wise to keep in mind the 4% of the actions that weren't delivered in relation to ECS, the Reconciliation Action Plan, the deliverable of the CIA project, and PDS, generally budget related. I open for questions, and general managers and managers are in the room today to comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy. So we'll work through as per the report, so we're not jumping from general manager to general manager. So if we can start perhaps with the Office of the CEO. If there's any, well, are there any general questions first for Troy before we start? No general questions, so we'll move then to the Office of the CEO. Are there any questions for the CEO? Office of the CEO, Councillor Shine, then Councillor Melissa, then Councillor Rebecca.
Just wondering if the CEO could comment on that item on page 41. Just trying to identify the ending in 947 in relation to the turnover rate of 18.95 based on 63 permanent exits. Is that accurate, and if any comments to make in relation to the rate?
The rate is certainly elevated. It's a common theme throughout industry at the moment. There's a great deal of unrest amongst employees throughout all industries, but also in local government, with people moving jobs, changing jobs. So it's a period of unrest, I suppose, that we've gotten there's a lot of mobility, I suppose, in the general workforces throughout the region and throughout the state. I was at a meeting last week with CEOs in South East Queensland. They're also all experiencing elevated turnover rates through their staff. It is a concern because obviously you've got to then go through a recruitment process to replace those people. So you've got a bit of a revolving door. We've got new people coming in and you've got people exiting at a similar rate. It's very difficult to get in front of that process at the moment. We're actually looking at options for supplementing how we're recruiting people to speed up that process, to see if we can actually get more people joining the organisation than leaving the organisation at this point in time. So there's various reasons why people leave. That's all monitored through exit interviews that we do with staff. But it's a difficult thing to do at this point in time. There's a high demand and there's people jumping ship left, right and centre for opportunities to go into jobs that are paying more in a very, very competitive work environment at this point in time.
Just in regard to, I think, Councillor Shine, the nut of your question might have been around, correct me if I'm wrong, it says 63 permanent exits of a head count of 1,330, which is nowhere near a percentage of 19%.
Right,
so can you explain just how that percentage is calculated?
That. That's a rolling average. So if it would work, that would be worked on 63 people leaving in this month, multiplied by 12, because that would be over the whole year period. So that's how you get that percentage.
Just on that though, CEO, is it 63? It's not as of the month, it's as of the first quarter. So it'd be 63 of the July, August, September. As that? Troy's happy to talk to that as well. That would be,
I think
so you'd multiply that
period. If that's the case, be multiplied by 4, yeah.
Troy,
Just to
follow up? Yep.
Based on your discussions with other CEOs last week and other information, are we roughly, is that 19.95 roughly similar to most others, or
we're looking at South East Queensland. That was South East Queensland CEOs we were talking about. So they're large. We're top of a foot over into the rural areas as well. So it does vary between rurals and major cities, but they all are experiencing elevated. We didn't go around with each individual CEO and discuss what their actual rates were, but they're all just saying as a general outcome, everyone's actually experiencing that.
Thanks. Just before we leave that subject, Dave, did you want to make a comment on it? Just the right hand button. Thanks.
Just very briefly, Councillor Shine, I think your question is very good. You're obviously looking to the maths of that. What we do is we take the number of, to calculate this, the number of exits during the quarter, and as the CEO says, annualise that by multiplying across the quarter. When we report monthly, we take that month and of course annualise that. You might have noticed there that we've derived the percentage, and this has been done, as I understand it, for quite a long period of time, dividing by the number of the headcount of permanent employees that remain rather than overall structure. Now that's the way it's been reported for a long period of time. Just to explain, if I had one person leave out of a structure of 100 people, I think we'd agree that's 1%, 1 over 100, not 1 over 99, which would be 1.01%. That, of course, averages back to 1%, not significant. But imagine if 50 people out of 100 left, surely we'd see that as 100%, 50% turnover, not 100%. It wouldn't be 50 over the 50 that remain. By dividing by the remaining number of people, it's not significant with low turnover rates, but if we were to use as a denominator to that calculation, not the 1330 who remain, but rather the structure of some 1600, I believe the percentage would be just under 16% rather than close to 19%. It's not overly significant with lower turnover rates, but as you get up to rates, say, 20%, as you calculate it, starts to turn into 25%, and that starts to look a little different, I'd suggest. I'd suggest that 18% starts to look different to 16%. And we could probably take comment from council here as to how we could report that. Certainly, I'm reluctant to see a change in the way we report things. If we were to do that, we would have to look back over the way we've reported the last 3 months, etc. So for this financial year, how it's reported.
I think the key is that just the explanation of how it is calculated, to be fair, and I'll take Councillor Shine's point, at first glance it looks completely different to what the percentage is. So we've got Councillor Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, page 41, and it's actually the same KPI, but maybe a different slant. When we're looking at the turnover of staff, are we also looking at the casual staff turnover? And my question is based on, my query is based on when we're looking at high inflation rates and higher cost of living rates, my experience has been that staff are reluctant to go full-time because a casual's hourly rate is much higher, and we all know why, but when it's what's in your pay pack at the end of every week is higher, then the reluctance to go full-time can be greater. So therefore you tend to have more of a casual team base. So are we looking at how many casuals are turned over? Do we look at what the percentage of our team is casual? And if our casuals are leaving at a higher rate, are we looking at why? You know, for example, I know in some industries there's a 4-hour minimum, but I believe in the local government it's a 2-hour minimum to get staff in. So that can affect the retention of staff as well. So just looking at the casual base, can I have comment on that, please?
The CEO, what is it?
My first comment is council staff can't elect to be casuals. They can only elect to be part-time permanents, and that's up to our whether that meets the operational requirements for that particular area. So they just can't determine that they're going to do that. If they're a casual, we determine who is going to be casual. They can't determine that they want to be a casual, and it's difficult to actually include the casuals in the turnover rate because you may have so many set hours available, say at the aquatic centre, for people to be casual, and some people may, due to their availability, might be able to do that 10, say there's 10 hours, do 10 hours, but other times during the year it might be 3 people doing the 10 hours. So the people who are available and for the job for that particular point in time, and if they are not available for that particular point in time, it's very difficult to keep that into account. So the total number of casuals that we would have at any one time can fluctuate seasonally as well. You know, when the aquatic centre closes down, those casuals won't be, a lot of those casuals won't be involved as well. So it's very difficult to include them in those stats.
Okay, may I have a follow-up, please?
Similar to parks as well, during peak season as well, I'd imagine. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
May I have a follow-up? Thank
Sure.
you. So do we monitor the turnover of the casual staff, the pool of casual staff in that case? Because if we're finding it really hard to find staff, then maybe I don't know, just asking, are we monitoring why the casual staff are leaving or staying, and possibly then being able to fill full-time positions? Because we really have a drain on, or a mass exodus at the moment going to private enterprise. So just, when you've got a pool of casuals, are we looking at putting them into full-time positions, or how does that work?
I think if they can apply for positions within the organisation that exist. We also look to make sure we have got the balance right between casual and permanent part-times or permanent full-times. So sometimes we will convert some of those positions across if we need to. if it's operationally advantageous to do so. The question as to specifically what process we go through in relation to deciding their reasons for staying, leaving, etc., I can't answer that at this point, Tom. I'll just take that question on notice and get back to you in relation to exactly what happens in relation to that.
We'll take that on notice and see how I'll follow that up. Councillor Rebecca, then Councillor Nancy.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, three, if I might. The first is also on page 41, that same KPI. So previously, councillors have been provided with a comparison of the vacancy rates with Southeast Queensland and then the rural and regional councils as well. And as you commented, Brian, you're right. We are in this sort of unique position where we've got a foot in the southeast. Sometimes we're counted as southeast. Sometimes we're counted as regional. And so it means that it's good for us to have a look at all of those numbers and see how we are going. The last time we looked, we were doing poorly for southeast Queensland, but pretty good for the further out west we went. So I wonder how much work it would be to get some more recent numbers, because I think the last time we had a look at those, it was about 6 months ago. Time flies when you're having fun. But maybe we could have another look just to see how we are tracking, because we'll then have two data sets and we can compare and contrast how we're trending. The other comment to make on that is we're getting up to a fifth now. And what's the impact on the community when we've got those sort of vacancy rates and staff turnover?
Well, it's a strain on the organisation in itself in trying to recruit and replace people. And as alluded to before, if you haven't got staff on ground, it then starts to put at risk some of the services that we provide, and some of that will flow through potentially in some of the reasons that come through as we progress through the operational plan reporting process and monthly reporting process. So those macro issues were covered earlier on today, but that's certainly one of those issues that potentially can put us at risk. Also, sometimes there is opportunities to replace with external contractors, which are usually more expensive if that's the case, to fill some of those gaps. So it's a matter of us and the managers of each one of those functions being creative about how can they manage to provide the same level of service, preferably within the same budget allocation, and with the limitations that they may have with accessing competent professional staff to deliver that.
I think that there is something in that number though that you know is startling, and also understandable for the community now. Like, okay, that's what we're talking about. When we've been talking about high staff vacancies and turnover, a fifth is more easy for people to imagine, right? Yep. And I think that we also really need to be aware that those sort of pressures that are put on the remaining staff, when there's that level of vacancy, what's being required of who's left is increased, and then it's sort of like a tipping point, because they then get more burnt out because they're doing more, and we see that in here every day. So it's a real issue for the organisation.
It is an issue.
So thank you for that. The second one is on page 42 of board books. As you know, I don't actually just look for the red crosses, but it so happens that this is another red cross. It's it's about the risk management module in Beacon. So at the very bottom of the page 8 of 144. So the milestone is implement the risk management module in Beacon to develop the corporate risk register functionality required to inform the business on tactical and strategic risks and opportunities. And the commentary is that challenges exist to deploying this, and a whip to identify an alternate solution for the ERM functionality. So I've been talking about risk registers for a while now, and that one concerns me, that because it was always the case that hold tight, we're getting this put in place, and then we'll be able to be more dynamic in responding as circumstances change and the risk hierarchy changes. But this tells me that actually we've come back a step almost. Can you comment on that, please, CEO?
Yeah, I can comment. I might ask Anne-Marie to comment as well in relation to this one. We've certainly got a risk management process in place and risk management plans at the operational level throughout the organisation. This is about putting in place a ICT system to manage that. So obviously you get better intelligence in relation to the risks. With the appointment of our new manager in ICT, we're going back and having a look at making sure that is appropriately integrated in relation to the systems that we have within the organisation, or should it be standalone, whichever. So they're stepping back and having a look to make sure that that is appropriate and working their way through that process at the moment. So it's not where we would like to be, but I think if we do it, we need to get it done properly. We need to make sure it's integrated throughout the systems that we use as an organisation. I don't know whether Anne-Marie wants to add anything to that.
Just if there's a comment on the overall risk then to the organisation because of this situation.
So I think, as the CEO said, we are managing our risk. We're not managing it in a software solution at the moment, in an appropriate software solution. So that's what this KPI is about. When we are bringing to council next week, we're proposing to bring to council straight to the ordinary meeting, an update from the ICT branch on our roadmap for the organisation, and this will be covered in that. So we need to bring in our software solutions to a single point within the organisation. So the actual biggest risk for the organisation is individual branches putting in solutions. So we're trying to bring that in under one central point, and that's within the ICT team, and we will be taking that roadmap to councillors next week.
Okay, thanks, Anne-Marie. Finally, Chair, Brian, I've spoken previously and we've had conversations as well about measuring increased diversity in council. And when I talk about diversity, I'm not just talking about male, female, other, I'm talking about young, old, and particularly, you know, the more senior residents in our community, my goodness, they're the ones that have got the skills at the moment that we're begging for. Different levels of physical ability. We've had those conversations. I could have sworn that we put it in the op plan to at least report back, not to include the measurements in the op plan, but to report back to councillors. And I can't see it. Can you tell me what's happening with that and where we're?
I think that was raised in context with the annual report, to include that in the annual report. I don't think it's been included per se within the op plan as was adopted by council.
Anne-Marie might make further comment if you don't mind. CEO.
Councillors, I apologise for that one. That was a request to me to include in the annual report. So what we're doing now, we're putting together those statistics. We will take them to councillors as at the 30th of June, which should have been included in the annual report, and report twice a year. So 31st of December and 30th of June every year.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Councillor Vonhoff. Councillor Nancy.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, Brian, you're getting hit with all the questions today, aren't you? So just in relation to the people and culture action items that we get a report on every month through the ordinary meeting, I've been looking at this and thinking that, and so that was developed as a result of the PKF report. I think we adopted it, the program of actions, in November last year to try and address the culture issues that we have within our organisation. And yet I feel like it's not embedded in the op plan. And I just wonder whether there's potential for some amendments. We've got amendments further on down here, and I'm just wondering whether there's potential for amendments in the op plan to add progressing those, because to the best of my knowledge, none of those, even 1 to 3 month action items haven't been completed. And I think it's important that we measure getting these actions done, because the vulnerable people in our organisation are still vulnerable until such times as we get all these actions done. And I just wonder whether we could consider putting something, probably 2 or 3 action items in our op plan that reflect that program of things that need to be done to try and protect our staff. What are your thoughts on that?
Couple of things. If council wishes to include anything in their op plan, you're at liberty to do so. That's not a problem. I think it's a bit unfair to say that none of those things have been achieved. There's, on the spreadsheet that's applied to council each week, there's a completed actions on the back of that that shows there's a whole lot of things that have been done at this point in time. Putting it, it is at front of mind within the organisation about delivering those actions within that action plan that we've got there. And there's a lot of work that's obviously happening in relation to that. We have got a very strong focus on it. If council wishes to have any, like, you get an opportunity each month to go get a progress on that. So it's front of mind and it's transparent to councils on a monthly basis. I don't know if it's going to make any difference by putting it in here in relation to the urgency or the availability of resources to deliver that. So I think that there's total transparency across how it's reported to council at this point in time. But if council wishes to include it in the operational plan, they're at liberty to do so.
All right, so I hear what you're saying. So I just wonder, those timelines that have been requested, they'll actually go in that document before it comes to us for next week's meeting?
You'll recall that at the last one, council's asked for a separate column to go down to the right-hand side with the estimated delivery times on each one of those.
That's what I asked for.
Yeah, so that was last month, and we'll be putting that into this month's coming up there as a progress report. And that was a question that was asked last time.
Yeah, I asked for it. Yeah,
Yep.
Thank you. So that will definitely be in the next one next week.
We'll put it in.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm happy with that. If that, but I do wonder whether, you know, it's our progress report, so it's like a report card of the organisation. I do wonder whether at least one action couldn't be in here to reflect.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Might give that some thought between now and next week, perhaps. Councillor Carl.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Brian. Brian, more a general question, not after a specific answer, but I think it's all of our responsibility here around the table and all of executive as a starting point. And my question is, are we competitive in the marketplace as for employment? And, you know, part of that's been answered, but I ask it in the context, and this is probably more to think about, I ask it in the context of the new normal, or there is no such thing as normal anymore in a changing environment. So how we turn our minds to being competitive in the marketplace, attraction and retention of employees. And we know it's a constrained environment, but there's also opportunities with constraint. So what is it that we do that is important and what isn't? I mean, we just have to continually focus on what it is we do that is really important and what isn't important. And I ask that in the context of my second question that I posed, how are we dealing with a constrained environment around staff resourcing? We are obviously asking people to do more because we know there's staff vacancies and lots of them and we can't fill them. So what is it that we need to do to actually ensure, if I say that the fuel tank is called energy, we can't sustain running on a fuel tank with energy. We'll run out of energy when we're under-resourced. And it'd be interesting to know how much people are actually doing across, on an average, position-wise, their own job, but additional work. It would be interesting to hear those stats at some point in the future about what is actually happening, because we cannot continue to trade on that energy and deplete it in an environment. So we've got to work within the context of the environment, but what are we doing to think outside the square to try and stem that inevitable path if we keep on doing the same things and get the same results? So I'm just posing them as a question, and I think there's some serious discussion that needs to take place on a strategic level. First and foremost, boardroom and executive, and how that filters to the organisation, and how there's inputs into that discussion from the organisation to inform us. We get these reports and we see that these challenges are here. It's like the Bob Dylan song, slow moving train, or slow train coming. I used to, but it is, I'm serious. I'm posing these questions, and we can't take them lightly. I don't expect an answer, but I'm raising it in this forum because it is a serious matter. We can't burn people out. We are providing levels of service with less staff. That is simply not sustainable. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do? We can't just throw money at the situation and hope that's the silver bullet. That might be part of a solution to ensure that we're more competitive. I don't know. How do we get more money? Do we constrain what we think is important in the services we provide to actually create more capacity, to employ more staff, to deliver a quality of work without burning them out? I don't know. But anyway, I would really, really like to have this discussion. And I've been on about it for a long time. Reporting on it is not a way to discuss the issues, in my view. So, Brian, I'm raising that. It's a very serious concern. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carley. Most of this is all lag indications, isn't it? There's not too much looking forward other than the trends. Are there any other questions for Councillor, sorry, demoted you significantly. CEO Brian? No other questions for the CEO, thank you. We move then to environment community, and perhaps also if there are questions here for Nick, and welcome to you, Nick. There's also the request for change in attachment 8 as well. So if there's questions, we can cover off on those at the same time. Would you like to come forward, Nick? Yeah, or wherever you'd like to. You can go to my desk there if you like. It's got a microphone on it. Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. It's got a microphone. It's probably easier with all your diaries and what have you that you've got to look for. Councillors, question. Councillor McMahon.
Chair, couple, Nick, good to see you back. How are you? Hope you're well. First of all, I think as a comment, Councillor Carl's comments regarding staff turnover and work not being done, I don't know if it's putting more pressure on the employees, but it is evident that there's something not getting done because we just don't have the positions filled, and I know your team are working hard on that, but just acknowledging that some of the red dots are because there are no people to do that. Well, not enough staff to rank the load, but we can work through it. Good point on page, what does that say, 73 regarding library visitations, and as we move into a post-COVID world, they're up across the board. I think every one of them, bar one or two, is well up. And so we had two hard years of COVID and all the rest of it. Quick question, can we look at our KPIs now to increase them next year and say, hey, people are coming back to libraries, the physical experience has gained value again, or would you suggest that, this is let's all get out and then it might slump again? I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks. Hand over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon, and good morning, councillors. It's great to be back, although the weather in Toowoomba is not the same as Cook Islands, I've got to say. Really good question, and a great observation. You're correct. Our visitor numbers are returning to pre-COVID numbers, and if you remember, we've discussed and debated this topic much over the last couple of years, and we've retained those KPIs at our pre-COVID levels. So we made no adjustments. We didn't reduce them, and for the last couple of years, we've been reporting underperformance, if I can use that term loosely, in relation to the number of visitations, because we've had those COVID restrictions and people's behaviours changed, and we weren't experiencing the same visitations that we were pre-COVID. For the first quarter of this year, we're seeing those numbers return almost right across the board. I think there's only one exception there, being the Clifton Library, although we experienced an uptick in the last month, but everything else is performing well. So in answer to your question, should we amend those KPIs? My advice would be let's track and monitor it. We're 1 quarter into the year. Not seeing anything that would suggest that this would change throughout the rest of the year, but we'll monitor that, and that's a conversation to be had when we're preparing this operational plan for next year. But it's certainly good signs to see those people returning back to pre-COVID kind of behaviours.
Good signs. We were singing the praises of our ebooks a year or so ago, and it's really good to see people venturing back to the libraries. Follow-up question. I've got 2 more, Chair. Can I zoom in on the town of Crow's Nest? And we have on page 70 absolutely spectacular numbers to our Crow's Nest Regional Art Gallery. Lovely art gallery. We've all been to see it. It's sitting at about, three times our KPI. And some of that, as you've said in the report, has to do with what's happening out there in the private sector. We've got the Nolan's book redevelopment, Nolan's building redevelopment, those kind of things. I don't know, I just would love to have a chat about future plans and how the public sector can work with the private sector. And we've got something to offer, you've got something to offer, and really, as Crow's Nest is one example of many, make that space a real working thing. But do we look to work with our neighbours and private enterprise and those kind of things in our art galleries team, and is that something we could look at?
Certainly something that we can and would be looking at. As you mentioned before, at the moment there's some resource challenges there. I think we're very busy just trying to maintain business as usual and tread water. It's probably an aspect to bring our tourism team into, and look at how we promote those destinations and all the things that we can do in those destinations. You're right, we've made the commentary there. We think the success of the Nolan's Block developments had a lot to do with people coming to Crow's Nest, and then while they're there, they're visiting our art gallery. And you'll also note the visitations at the Rosalie Gallery are up as well. We've not made the same link there, but perhaps there's some flow on from that. There's some art trails or something that's happening. We've also had some good exhibitions there too, after people were starved of access to those sorts of things for a period of time. So I think it's a watch and monitor and learn, and I think that there's potential probably in the tourism space to be promoting those that destination tourism.
Yeah, and I agree with your points. I suppose I'm outlining the point that we have actually something really good to offer here. I'm certainly not saying Crow's Nest and the expense of every other town in Toowoomba region, don't get me wrong. They've all got their point of difference, but people are going out and seeing the regions, and I think as council, you're right, it might be through our tourism team, we need to really be part of that. And we're seeing all this great stuff at Crow's Nest, people moving there, that kind of thing, but I don't just think we should go, yeah, we'll watch, I don't know, maybe it's a conversation for later on, but I'd love to see us really be part of that as council and as the facilities provider in our small towns across Toowoomba region. But
I would say I think we are doing that. Whether it's as coordinated as it could be, there's an opportunity there, but there's plenty of promotion through our social media channels and our partnerships with Southern Queensland Country Tourism and all of those things to promote not only what council's doing, but what's happening in community, and saying, hey, have you thought about a day trip here and come and see these things? So it is happening. There might be an opportunity for us to think more strategically about the coordination of that. And you're right, it's not just this one destination of Crow's Nest. It's all the towns and localities and things that are happening right across our beautiful region. So that's a conversation I think I take back to the tourism team, and we look to in the next, perhaps it's in our operational plan next year that we're looking to do a project around some of that destination marketing, packaging, and how we do that with Southern Queensland Country Tourism and other partners.
Nick, final question. On page 59, we talk about the satisfaction rating of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander programs. That's at 0, and to my knowledge, it's been at 0 as long as I've been sitting around this table. And it's not because we're not doing the programs, we are, so we should be, and they're good, but more that we don't properly measure it because it's usually done by external providers. So I'm just wondering about the relevance of that KPI moving forward. Is it something you'd consider taking out?
Need to give that a bit more thought. I think, Councillor McMahon, I think there's value in trying to measure that. You're right, our commentary says that we don't have a methodology or a tool to measure that yet. The delivery of programs and events in that space, council is typically a partner supporting others to deliver that. There's still opportunities and ways for us to measure the success of our investment and our involvement in that. Just haven't matured to there yet. We've been on I think a very explosive maturity journey in that space in the last couple of years, and we're doing a lot of good stuff. I think it's just going to take some time for us to turn our mind to how we might measure that.
Yeah, and I reiterate, and I agree with you, we're not doing them, it's that we're partnering with external providers to have these events, but I think it's been at 0 for a long time, so ongoing conversation, do we get the technology to measure it, or do we look at taking the KPI out? But happy with some conversation around that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. We've got Councillor James, Councillor Melissa, Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Chair. My question, probably got two, Chair, if I may, but one specifically to Nick, just in regard. So overall, looking at this and going through the indicators and targets and things like that. Generally speaking, I think in this area obviously are performing really well. If I can drill down on two, and it continues on probably a theme that we've talked about already today. I just looking at it, would a fair assumption to be made looking at these numbers is that in two areas here, one and particularly being regulatory services, and two to a lesser extent youth services, are they areas potentially looking at the outcome and the output of what we're achieving here that are resource challenged, if I put that word? And I'm sure there's probably other areas of it, but I said just looking at this particularly when we're talking about a level of service around regulatory service, it seems as though we've increased in inquiry, if that's the way, and then just in terms of being able to service that.
Thanks, Councillor O'Shea. Yes, that's an accurate observation, and I listened with interest to the conversation that was happening earlier around those things, and we are experiencing the same turnover that not just the organisation but the entire world is experiencing. I've got to say, I just did have a week away overseas, and the same thing was happening in Auckland, and the same thing was happening in the Cook Islands, and it's happening the world over. 2 hours in the customs line was a fantastic experience. All due to staff shortages. So it's happening everywhere, and we are feeling the pressure. Our people are under pressure. Councillor Rebecca, you said, I'm summarising, but you said we haven't got people, we've lost people, and those that are here are having to do more to try and maintain services, and that's how I feel, and people are feeling the pressure. And you can see, you picked out a couple, Councillor James, around regulatory services where we're not meeting some of those KPIs. Having said that, we are making sure that we triage and prioritise that which is most important and that which presents the most risk, and they are being dealt with. So we feel confident that we're dealing with the high risk things that we need to be dealing with, and the stuff that we're not dealing with is lesser, lower risk. So let me make that point. But it is a challenge to try and keep up. And in some parts of that part of the business, we are experiencing additional demand as well. So building inspections and property inquiries and all those sorts of things are up. We've had some success in recruiting in some of the areas, and we're trying some different attraction and retention strategies which are working, and we're seeing increased job satisfaction in our teams anecdotally. So that's good, but as soon as you turn your attention and focus somewhere, another challenge presents itself. Some of our performance too, I've got to say, is looking good. It's we're getting the green ticks. but the depth of, I was talking about a football squad, that the depth is pretty thin. We've got a good A grade squad, but the reserve graders ready to step up when the A graders are injured or away on leave or something is not there. So, in some places we're not that far away from being very challenged as well. I think it's an important thing to make you aware of, something I'm certainly aware of, and trying to do my best to engage with the teams and come up with strategies to help and assist, but it's very real and it's right there.
I think just following up on that, maybe it's a conversation for us to have around our standards of service, which I think Councillor Carl touched on as well. Standards of service for a period of time when this is a challenge to us. We're establishment that number of 1,600, let's not forget, and we're close to 200 behind that. So there is going to be some pressure. So it might be even, as you say, Nick, prioritising the higher risk ones, which is what you're doing, and I'd assume that's a conversation that's having at ELT with the CEO as well, looking at the risk profile of each of those areas and making sure they're done. So that may be a conversation that we need to have more urgently, Mayor and CEO, in regard to that as a conversation. Might be those standards of service that we need to review for a period of time until we get to a level. So I just might leave that with you to have that conversation. Councillor O'Shea, you got another one?
Yeah, sorry, if I can just follow on that, you probably stole my sermon there. That's what I was going to say. I think from a Councillor Carl mentioned it before, and as Nick mentioned, some comments that were made by Councillor Von Hoff, I think this whole question around service delivery or level of service to the community is, whilst the landscape has changed as a result of all the factors we talked about recently, but it's also a conversation this organisation's been having since the first day I walked in here in 2016. So I guess short term, it probably needs a few things around as to what are the priorities now. But I mean, long term wise, can I ask whether it's through Dave or I suppose or Brian, is that a process that still is in trance, is in track? We talked about sustainability, service catalogues, and I know there's an item in service catalogue earlier in the CEO's report, but just where are we tracking towards that? Because it's ever changing, and as I said, it's been a conversation that I've heard been bubbling around since the first day I arrived here.
Dave, would you like to make a commentary on that? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Certainly, Councillor, it's also been a conversation since the first day I was working for Council quite some time ago. Clearly and I think it's an issue for all governments, there's an issue between service expectation and the ability to provide that within the resources we have. Now, I have seen many times where, and there is a difference between the way officers may look at how this can be done from a technical perspective, and of course how councillors view it from a community service delivery perspective. A number of times we've seen that, well, and understandably so, councillors are very understanding of a community service obligation and have typically sought to meet that, and understandably so. So BTS at the moment is looking at where those benefits can be achieved in a way that is acceptable to council and the community. So our focus has been more towards things such as CapEx prioritisation, focus on renewals, replacement, optimisation of replacement point for assets. It's down that path that there are literally seven-figure savings to be achieved. We can perhaps pursue other things, but they're unlikely to be broadly acceptable to our client base. However, our client base is probably very accepting of efficiencies in our internal processes, and I personally believe that's where we can maximise the benefit of our resources in a way which would ultimately be supported by council.
So it's a work in progress, but I think you make a good point. We all agree that it's a changing landscape. So I think we need to be flexible as a council to give the support to our operational team around that, service delivery, timeframes and what have you, and actually alert the community of that. Councillor Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nick. Great analogy, re the football team. Because it's interesting you say that, because it was only a conversation I was having with someone this morning. You know, we've got great here, but it's the depth underneath that, you know, is lacking, which means it's difficult when someone is on annual leave or someone's sick or there's no succession planning coming up through the ranks. And it also makes it difficult for training too, because this upper level is so under duress trying to get the work done that there's also not a great depth of training underneath. So great analogy, I like that. Thank you. And Councillor McMahon actually stole some of my thunder. So page 70, that's okay. With the galleries, I just wanted to make comment. Excellent work. I've been the recipient of some great visits to the galleries, particularly Rosalie and Crow's Nest. And I think from my observations, a lot of it is the ability to interact with the artists themselves. And I think that's a really great initiative. And the varied exhibitions that you have as well. So congratulations. It's been a great thing for our regions, and the community themselves are getting behind it, but a lot of visitors coming in as well. So, and it was extraordinary, the studio art trails to the visitors coming to our region just for that was extraordinary. So we've got a great depth there, I think. So thank you. But to page 73, or 38 of 144 in the library. So two questions, if I may. One is Yarramanokey and Clifton, the numbers are down. Can you just expand on that a little bit, please? But my second is looking at the increase or significant increase in numbers or number of visitors to our libraries. I've had quite significant feedback from our residents asking for Sundays. Is that something we're going to look at, particularly Highfields? Well, that's where the bulk was, I should say.
Okay. The first question first around those libraries that aren't hitting those targets. Look, I don't know what's driving that. I don't know if it's community behaviour or what it is. I think it's a monitor for us and see what happens over the next few months, and perhaps we need to do some more promotion and remind people that the facilities are open, and or seek some feedback about other days we're open, not suitable or the like. Your second question, sorry,
just because it's interesting that the majority of the other libraries, the numbers are significantly up. So it's interesting that 2 or 3 are down. So it'd be, are we not offering the right hours, or do we not have the right offerings there?
Yep.
So
and I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. So we'd need to do some more work in that space. In terms of opening on Sundays, look, we're aware of, we were open at a couple of our libraries on Sundays, and we haven't returned that. It's not at the forefront of our thinking at the moment. I'm aware of some desire to have that happen. I think again, it comes back a little bit to our resourcing. We're sort of stretched and challenged at times to make up the shifts that we're currently offering, and I'm not confident that we could recruit enough of the right people to extend our hours. It's certainly, we're aware of that, and again, continue to monitor, I suppose. Happy to take that back to the team. As you know, we've got a new acting manager of library and cultural services now after Bronwyn's retirement. So Dom Dawes in that role. I asked him to have a look at that and think about that, and we'll continue those conversations with councillors.
Just looking at Crow's Nest Gallery and knowing how many people attend that gallery on a Sunday to chat with the artists, because that's when you normally have the artist discussions on a Sunday. Our families and our visitors are looking for some things on Sunday, and particularly with Highfields being that beautiful new library. I could imagine families, attending there and enjoying that beautiful space on a Sunday.
Yep.
So. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks. And thanks for the comments around the football analogy. And while you were speaking, I probably had a better thought around that. And it's more like we've got some of the A graders on holiday or injured, and the reserve graders are already playing the A grade game and doing a very good job of that. And it's, you know, we're getting down and down and down and down. So, you know, we are doing a lot of succession planning, you know, and planning for that. And the one thing that it has been able to do for us is to give people opportunity, and they're really stepping in the opportunity and doing some really good things. It's been, you know, there's some really great people in this organisation doing some amazing things. So it's been really good to see they've shown that they're ready for the big league. So it's good.
Can I just say yes, and that's been highlighted in the LGAQ conference and also the Rhodes Congress last week. You know, we speak to other councils around our region and around Australia, and what we're doing here, you know, particularly, you know, things like in our active transport and areas, and I know that because that's my area, we are doing some amazing things compared to some other councils. So I know we've got challenges, but we, you know, I am always one for giving the bouquet as well. That's important to acknowledge that the teams that we have are amazing. It's just, we just want more of them.
Thanks, Councillor Melissa. Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Nick, for the report. Just a couple of comments. The Crow's Nest Art Gallery, for councillors' information, had their first Indigenous exhibition out there, and that opened on a Sunday. So it was actually quite well attended and a very high quality exhibition. So, you know, really, really good. Just looking at the Toowoomba Art Gallery, I note, because I went to go in there yesterday, as I went past at lunchtime, it's now not open on Tuesdays as well as Mondays. So it used to be Monday closed, now I note it's Monday and Tuesday. So I'm sure that would affect the hours as well. Would that affect, did I miss something? Is that because of staffing, or is it, what is it about, and is it ongoing? Because, you know, I mean, the community and visitors, particularly the visitors, have really missed the Toowoomba Art Gallery because such a high quality gallery, and just wondering if that's going to be, I often drop in there if I'm going past for a short trip, and that's the first I've noticed that it's not open Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that we've never been open Mondays. That's been the day it's closed. I can't recall what might have happened on Tuesdays. I just need to go back and get that detail and let you know around whether that was just a once-off temporary thing or if it's, you know, a longer temporary or permanent arrangement. I just need to check that.
So, Nick, it's on the sign that's outside. Looks pretty permanent to me, and it was open on, the only day it was actually closed was Mondays and public holidays. So if you could just, and there must be a reason, perhaps it's staffing, I don't know, but as we get into the, you know, the Christmas period, would wonder at that going forward, I guess.
I will look into that and circulate some advice for councillors. I can't remember the reasoning behind that decision. I'd need to look at it. I do know that right now they are very, very short-staffed. There's a couple of staff on maternity leave and things like that. So it's a real challenge. Again, fantastic team that just go over and above and beyond. And the gallery was closed for quite a long period of time after the storm damage in January, and only reopened at the beginning of September. So it's been closed for 9 months.
Look, and I missed the opening. I had something else on at the time, and it was really missed through, you know, those with visitors coming here asking about the gallery, and you know, we told them they understand. But I'd also like to add to the bouquets for the regional art galleries. I think they've just been, and I've been to some of the exhibitions there. There seems to be a lift in the well, you shouldn't say lift in the quality. It's all wonderful art, but it's really great to go for a drive out there and just have a look. Really good. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Megan.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Nick, I wanted to talk about the RAP, and you know, I don't know whether this goes back to the resourcing again, but just the importance of something like that in an organisation of this size and scale, and I think as a going towards being an employer of choice and leading the community on having a RAP. What's happening there? Is it just an inability to get it started, or can you talk about that for me?
I can talk about that. We have one staff member working in that space, as you know, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships Officer. And so she has everything that's related to First Nations and Indigenous partnerships thrown at her, and it's a challenge to work through all those requests of her and prioritise the work that needs to be done. There's lots of distractions and being pulled in many directions. The RAP was due to commence, our work was due to commence now in July, so that's only a recent initiative of council to undertake that, and at this point in time we've just been unable to set aside all the other distractions and calls on that officer's time and focus on the RAP. So we're having conversations around that and trying to support in other ways so that her time is freed up so that she can prioritise and focus on the RAP. We're very aware of how important that is, and I'm a strong advocate for it too. And you know, we're putting together expressions of interest calls from our staff to be on the steering committee for that project, but very aware of it. Thank you for picking it up. I think it was something certainly the council needs to be aware of, that project's behind where we would have liked to have been. Having said that, it's a 2-year project and we're only the first 3 months in, so there's plenty of time to catch up, but it does need our attention and focus.
Well, while we're on the bouquets, I am going to give you another one because I know that you are a really big supporter of it and that you're pushing and you come a lot to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander meetings, and so thank you for your support for that and championing it, Nick.
Thanks, Councillor Megan. Any other questions for Nick, Environment Community? Nick, just in regard to the request for change, do you want to make any comment to that?
Yes. I need to find them now. I'll speak from memory. There are a number of items in there that we noticed, I guess, were missing. So there was some actions and KPIs around. In aquatics, for example, we talked about regional pools, but we'd forgotten Milne Bay and Highfields or vice versa. I can't remember quite which way it was. And there's some other things there that we thought were important for us to be measuring. So you're also aware Paul Reynolds has just recently started in that role. So Paul, in going through the quarterly review and update, identified some additional tasks and milestones they'd like to be reporting on and some KPIs to report on. So it's the addition of KPIs there that we think ought to be there.
Okay, just in regard to the community rooms, Nick, on page 199 on board books, it's identified the attendance community rooms, and in brackets 3rd floor Toowoomba City Library is identified in there. It's probably too early to consider the community rooms at Highfields, but that might be something that could be thought about for the next operational plan, perhaps.
Yeah, certainly. We could put that in at the next operational plan if that's acceptable. We're monitoring that information through the project itself. So through the project, there's benefits realisation that we're anticipating to experience as a result of delivering that project. So we're monitoring that. So it's things like attendances and utilisation rates and a number of other things. And at the moment, not sure about the community rooms, but certainly the library visitations are far exceeding what was planned, but that's pretty typical of a new facility when it's open.
Thanks for that. Mayor, did you have a question?
Page
comment?
88, Nick, the disaster management area. I note that there's a lot of green ticks there. Are you comfortable we've got adequate resourcing giving and training, and I am as chair of that committee. I think the response we've had in recent times to disasters is good. Do you see any need for any further training or any further resourcing in that area?
Look, I think we're doing a lot better now than what we were a number of years ago. The people in that space are doing really well, and there are additional resources now than there were a few years ago, Mayor. And I think those people in that team are doing a great job. There's always a challenge across the organisation in getting the support of other officers, you know, in preparedness. So we're very good in response times. An emergency happens and we respond very well. And everybody's on a heightened level of awareness at the moment, I think, given the events of the last few years, both bushfires and floods, and so that task is made a little bit easier. But when you go for a few years without having any events to respond to, we forget that we need to be prepared for them. And again, that those resourcing challenges, everyone's very busy trying to stand still and maintain business as usual when they're asked to think about disaster preparedness. It's another strain on their time. But I'm very confident that we've got enough resources looking after our organisation and doing that planning. There's always a need for us to make sure we're providing ongoing training and upkeep and maintenance of skills. We've conducted a couple of exercises in the last month, which went very well. And were very well attended and supported by the staff across the organisation. So I think we are doing much better and we're on an upwards trajectory there.
No, I'd agree through you, Mr. Chair, but I do know that, you know, when it comes to disaster management, you really haven't got a clue what's over the horizon. And I think post-2011, we're far better prepared than we've ever been. Whether that's adequate for something that might happen in the future, I don't know, but, you know, I'm pretty proud of where we are.
Agree.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Thanks very much. We move now to Finance and Business Strategy Group, and we'll have the report as read. Are there any questions for Anne-Marie? We also have Brent here from ICT if there's questions in that area. Kylie's here, so and Andrew. So Anne-Marie's got quite the team here to support her if there are other questions. Any questions for Anne-Marie? Councillor Nancy?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anne-Marie. So just on page 113, if I might, the PCE business plan, it says it's zero complete, but there's no comment there explaining why. And also the SLAs on page 116, the same thing. I'm just wondering if you could give us an update.
Yeah, and that's as a direct result of vacancies within the branch. We've had significant vacancies. The business plan has commenced, but it is a work in progress, the development of the plan.
Thank you. So if I could just then follow on with that, that theme around the vacancies. I just wonder, are the advertisements getting out as soon as possible when there's notification that someone's leaving and trying to get those positions filled, understanding the difficulties we're having with employing people. So I do wonder that, but I also noticed a couple of our staff have been fantastic on LinkedIn when there's a vacancy, and normally it's within their own branch or department or portfolio or whatever. They give this great spiel about what a great place it is to live and give you all this vibe. Which really encourages people to take a dive in and have a look at that position. And I used to try and do that at Downlands, and I think it's such a great thing to really sell living in Toowoomba. You might have trouble getting a house at the moment to live in, but that aside, it really sets it up well for people to apply for the position. And I'd love to see council itself take on that initiative. And I hope our staff continue to do it, and I've certainly shared it whenever I've seen it on LinkedIn, which is where the professionals go to get their jobs. I just wonder whether that is being looked into to ensure that we are selling those positions to external people in the hope that they will live here. I mean, we've always talked about when we employ people, it's best if they do live here because they live it. They live and breathe it, and I often use Nick, if you'll excuse me saying this, Nick's family. They are so embedded in our community through sport and all sorts of activities. So his family, and Nick himself particularly, lives and breathes Toowoomba and the region and wants the best outcomes for it. And that's the qualities we need to find in our staff. I've probably gone a bit off course here, but I got a bit impassioned with it. So I just love what some of our staff are doing to promote those positions, and I hope that our organisation does it as well, to try and get these people here in these positions, to avoid all these issues where we're not being effective as an organisation overall because we've got these gaps in in our staffing to deliver.
So there's a couple of things we're doing. Because of the vacancies within the PCE team, we've been outsourcing some of our recruitment activities with local companies. We have been using that value proposition, what it means to come to the region, what it means to come and work for Toowoomba Regional Council. We have shared the videos that have been developed by the strategic planning team over the last number of years, highlighting the great attributes of the region. So we're hoping that we'll gain some success in this area. So what we're doing, we're putting whole groups where we've got quite a few vacancies within the ICT. So we're outsourcing all of that recruitment to one company. The same within the strategic planning, we've outsourced that. So we're very happy with the, it's local buy again. We're engaging our local suppliers to support the PCE team in this area. So we're hoping to get some good results from that one.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Nancy. Any other questions for Anne-Marie? If there's no other questions, thanks, Anne-Marie. We'll move to ISG, Infrastructure Services. Mike, welcome to you once again. You look like you've got a bit of gear there. You're more than welcome to use my seated area if that's easier for you. Thank you. We'll take the report as read. Thanks, Brent, for coming on. Thank you, Kylie. If there's any questions for ISG, General Manager is here to answer those, so I'll open the floor up to questions. Councillor Nancy.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So I noticed in these areas here in relation to roads that a lot of them are saying no projects delivered to date, program to start in Q2. So I wonder if you'd help me understand what the staff do in the first quarter, the road staff, because that's sort of across the whole gambit there in the reporting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Sunville, and good morning, councillors. No, it's a good point. This year has been a slower start to the 22-23 program. Two key reasons there. The flood restoration programs that we've been working on, or the emergent work, and as I've discussed with council over a number of months, that's gone from November last year to the end of August this year. So a lot of our teams have been tied up. That would be across both capital and operations side in doing emergent works, over 7,600 locations there. That said, that also caused delays with the 21-22 program in doing that. So there was a number of projects that went through into the start of this financial year as well. So that's where that is. And then the other element is there's a number of those ones mentioned in there, such as the reseal programs and asphalt and stuff we don't typically do until about Q2, once we get out of the cold period. So from September on, we start looking at doing those just from a scheduling point of view. So those are probably the three key elements there. And obviously, as others have discussed this morning, resource constraints as well, where we're focused and where we've got staff available. Thank you.
So I guess the crux of the answer is that they've been busy doing the emergent works. I think that's the question. Thanks, Mike. Any other questions, councillors, with ISG? No other questions? Councillor Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair, through you. It's about the drainage operations, Mike, and I suspect you're going to say the same thing about the staff shortages and also the priority being on the flood works, the emergent works that have come out of the flooding. But I'm looking at page 92 of 144, 129 on board books. And we get requests, drainage-related customer requests received, and then the number of those requests that are completed with within the agreed timeframes, and it it's sort of the lament of not just local government, but state, federal, big organisations, public service organisations, where if you could be more flexible, some of those drainage requests might actually prevent some of the flood works that are coming down the track when we know that we've got wet weather coming over the summer. Is that a fair comment, or are they completely unrelated?
Yeah, probably give you, I suppose, the insight. You're talking about page 129, 417, so that's under drainage operations in our CNM, I think it's south section, north.
It'd be the same across the three though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it is, south. So those, a lot of that's the response to pathways, so a pathway indicator, so the requests coming in and whether we're responding in within our timeframes. And as you mentioned there, the formal responses to those can sometimes, well, resource constraints are affecting a lot of response times. In respect to can those repairs, if repairs are needed, alleviate any further flooding, obviously where it's deemed urgent, or I think there's a bit of a triage that's done by the teams, and if there's something serious they get out and they get it sorted, and they become the ones that get done. And we do get, as you'd imagine, a spectrum of drainage requests, some things that may affect you or I that we're happy with and can live with for a while. You know, some people find quite irritating. So it just depends how those they come to us. That said, a number of these pathways as well will also crisscross into our drainage planning team within our TNDP branch, and we're down to, on this last quarter, probably 2 or 3 senior staff in that area. So we're about running at around about 50% resource in that small team. So that triaging is probably the important part, that between the managers and the coordinators and others, they look at what's there. And then probably further to that, we are taking a lot of information that's happened over the last 12 months in particular, because that's the focus, in towards the betterment programs and different programs that are available to us to put in for. And we've actually got meetings again this afternoon on that thing. So right across the region we're looking at opportunities for where improvements can be made on and above a like-for-like replacement that would mitigate future damage in similar events.
Thanks, Councillor Rebecca. I'm just reflecting a little bit on a lot of the conversations here around staff numbers and what have you, which is a trend right across the organisation, naturally. And I just wondered, Anne-Marie, whether it's an opportunity to touch base with Orin, the wellbeing officer, and just seeing if there's been a spike in people presenting or seeking some level of support as a trend for us to be aware of as well, given it's a new position and what that actually looks like. Maybe at the group report next week or something, you might be able to just give a bit of an update. Completely off topic, but I think it's relevant. Thanks, Mike. No other questions for Mike? Councillor Antonio, the Mayor.
Can I just ask, Mike, are you increasing the amount of private sector involvement, contractors' involvement to deliver, and do you see that trend continuing? Because, they're probably pretty efficient. They don't have the restrictions that we probably have.
Everybody's very tight out there in the marketplace at the moment. We're actually out to market for significant contractor support. Well, when I say out to market, we've got a report to direct ordinary committee next week for EOI for assistance with the flood restoration program. So we hope by the end of first quarter next year, that we've got on at least one, if not a number of contractors out there. with the flood restoration program. So as I've explained to council, we're in the process of doing all the submissions to Queensland Reconstruction Authority. We've only got our first approval through in the last couple of weeks. There's about 15 submissions. Probably 2/3 of those are in, and the rest will follow. And we hope to have those all in by Christmas, and then as those approvals come through, we can get on and do the repair works. We're envisaging probably 60% plus of the flood restoration works will be externalised. In regards to that, as I've indicated to council, we're probably circa 120 million of that order of restoration works to be done. So a lot of contractors will come on, well, at least, you know, how we'll run it next year, early next year. So for the next 18 months, there will be a lot of work happening out there. When we come to other works, I think we've got a significant, a reasonable balance between in-house and externalised works. And at the moment, we're probably putting more out to market again due to the resource constraints that we have. We've got significant restraints across all areas of the business. You know, everything from our workshops, trying to get, you know, mechanics is very difficult. So obviously we utilise a lot of the opportunities within Toowoomba. But again, when we go to approach workshops or to approach contractors, everybody's got full books. You know, I know of companies that pre-COVID had a wait list of 2-3 weeks to get something done. Now it's 2-3 months. And I think you've probably found that in your own private lives as well. So we don't necessarily get a preferential treatment as much as we'd like to at times. So, you know, working with our local industry, we've got very good relationships across the board, and we one thing council does do is pay well and pay on time.
The question was really about, do you see a trend in the years to come towards more of our service being delivered by the private sector?
I think there'll be always a reasonable percentage. You know, I'd say, you know, if we had full employment, we'd still be running at 20 to 30% externalised work. At the moment, we're having to think about how we do that. A lot of the consultancies, where, you know, that's probably running at design works and stuff are probably running at 60 to 70% externalised. So there's a lot of consultancy support required doing design works and different and the like across not only our group but probably across council.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mike. Other questions for Mike? Then other questions. Thank you very much, Mike. Oh, sorry, Councillor Carroll.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just need to take that opportunity, I think, to make a comment. We always have contracted out certain amount of work in ISG for our council, but I draw council's attention to something Campbell Newman said after the 2011 flood when Brisbane City went too far, that it was a big mistake, and they had a emergency and disaster events from the top of Queensland down to Victoria. And the fact is the contractors much, you know, it was a seller's market, and because they didn't have capacity in-house, their community suffered because of that. And he saw that. So I think it's always a balance, and I think we should always keep our capacity at a certain level inside our organisation. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment. Okay, thanks again, Mike. Appreciate it. We move now, councillors, to planning, and welcome Nicola, General Manager Nicola, to come forward again. Nicola, I'll offer my seat there for you if you'd like it, to give you enough room. Spread your papers out. So this is the Planning and Development area group. Do we have any questions for General Manager Nicola? Councillor Megan.
Thank you, Nicola. I hope you're, it's hard to be across everything on day 2 or whatever it is for you. Just a comment about the Green Infrastructure Plan's actions, which I appreciate, you know, all of that again, same reasons, staffing and all of that, but it is pleasing to see so that's on page 161. Noted there that council has requested a report relating to tree planting options for future consideration, so that's coming back. I don't really need a comment about that. What I wanted to ask you about, and it's not to trivialise it in any way, is about Toowoomba City Centre creative lighting strategy. Like, I bang on about it every single day, but it's not, I mean, it's the seriousness of having our CBD lit in a way that is not only creating amenity and safety, but, you know, for our tourism, for our the beauty of our city, which is woeful at the moment. So that's off track. But then I do see in the request for a change, we've made some progress there, where it's identify a suitable location within Toowoomba CBD to commence development of a lighting pilot to inform cost analysis. Can you tell me, A, why it was unfunded to start with, and B, what this means, this possible change?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question, and I apologise if I've got a bit of a croaky voice. So I refer to action item, and it's 02723, prepare a Toowoomba City Centre creative lighting strategy. Now, the operational plan was prepared before the budget, and unfortunately that project was not funded for 2022-23. I'm not obviously in a position to provide information about why that wasn't the case. I'm just aware that that is what happened. And you also raised the issue of integrate the green infrastructure strategy into the new planning scheme as well. In respect of that particular matter, excuse my voice, sorry. The council was briefed on the MLES mapping on the 26th of October, and I think there's another briefing which is scheduled for the 23rd of January. So we'll be able to provide more information in relation to the policy approach and planning scheme. I'm fortunate to have Michelle here today as well, before my voice breaks up. Michelle, did you want to add anything further in respect of that matter?
Good morning, councillors, and thank you, General Manager. In terms of the lighting strategy, a new request was prepared based on the outcomes of the workshop that was facilitated in the previous financial year. And with the new request process, that has to be prioritised across the organisation, and in this circumstance, that was a project that was not able to be funded within our requirements and budgets and all of the other priorities in the organisation. Additionally, with the restructure of the Regional Architecture and Heritage Branch and Strategic Planning and Economic Development, the Urban Design function has transferred across to Regional Architecture and Heritage Branch, and they will be now taking on the realm of City Centre Master Plan and including the lighting strategy. Obviously, there have been some gaps in resourcing in those areas. Recruitment had been underway for the Principal Urban Design position. So there is a little bit of lag time in being able to properly scope and engage for that project. The pilot approach is actually one that's been identified by the Manager of Regional Architecture and Heritage Branch as an opportunity to do some early testing and advance that in a way that might inform the further scope of that study. And pending those resources and being available to do that, I'm sure that she is very keen to work in that space. Obviously, there are a number of priorities for that branch as well around social housing, and I'm sure that Jade would be able to provide more comment about what she envisaged in the pilot project, but it is a combination of simply the breadth of work that the organisation needs to accomplish, how we set our priorities in amongst that, resource availability and what we can deliver internally and externally.
Councillor Megan, you also highlighted, of course, the request for change on page 193 of board books, or in your copy there, Michelle, page 9 of your document, I'd imagine. Did you want to just talk a little bit more about that? I know you just mentioned it briefly, but we say here commence suitable location in Toowoomba City Centre to commence development of a lighting pilot to inform cost analysis from the 1st to the 11th to the 30th of the 6th. I just note during that time, obviously a festive period as well, there's, you know, lights in the streets and all sorts of things as well, so I wondered if it should be, you know, broadly there might be an opportunity to actually do something physically, not just pick a site, but actually do something. But I'll ask you to make comment to see what that actually means.
Thank you, Chair. I would need to defer to my other manager in the group to more fully explain those details, but perhaps there is an opportunity, as you suggest, through the Christmas lighting, to work with the operational areas to perhaps look at something, but I'm afraid that's actually something that I would need to defer to Jade Bebbington about.
Thanks, Michelle. Councillor Megan, follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take that as a win. Okay? That's a win. I'm creeping towards some fairy lights in the CBD. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca, and then Councillor
Could I
Melissa.
just quickly second that, please?
Second the fairy lights? Okay.
Yes, if we could get them by Christmas, it would be great.
By Christmas? Okay. This year, Christmas 22. Okay. Councillor Rebecca.
I won't give away my Secret Santa present, but if they are fairy lights, you'll know who they came from. Thanks, Chair. Through you too, if I might. They're both actually about the request for change. So on that same page, formalise an action plan for future city centre master plan priorities. And the request is for it to be removed entirely from the op plan with the commentary that it hasn't been budgeted. And I just would challenge the idea that we remove it entirely from the op plan, because if the city centre master plan is a priority of this council, and I think we will all agree that yes it is, I would rather that it stay in there and that we have we don't achieve that KPI, but at least it stays in there and it's sort of front of centre of mind still, and we work towards it. I think my fear is when things fall out, they never come back in without a lot of work to reinsert them. So I would actually be much more comfortable with that staying in the op plan, and then potentially come the next round of budgeting, it's there for us to consider. Can I have a little comment on that one, please, through you, Chair, to the GM or to Michelle, whoever has more voice?
Most certainly, this is your operational plan. So by all means, we can leave the action in there. The reality is that it is an unfunded project and it is not currently resourced. Similar to the comments about the lighting strategy, this is also part of that work that transfers to Regional Architecture and Heritage Branch, along with the position from SPED. And there has been an attempt to recruit for that position. Unfortunately, that hasn't been able to be achieved at this point in time. And I'm sure that we will always, it is a priority, it is an important strategy of council. It has been an ongoing piece of work for many years. It is going to be a priority for us. We will certainly revisit that when resources are available and the ability to do that. So it's entirely up to you, but the reality is, leaving it in, we will not be able to meet that KPI in the foreseeable or near-term future.
Thanks very much for that. Maybe it's something that my colleagues will want to speak to, but like I said, I'm more comfortable with a cross and a zero than it being removed entirely, because at least it shows the strategic intent of council.
Yeah, we'll just finalise this one while we're at it. This is similar to ones we've had before, where we've not been able to achieve, and we've either changed the targets to suit what we can achieve. I tend to agree that it's worthwhile keeping in there with a notation on it that simply says unfunded this year, but it stays in there as a line item, because I tend to agree in the busyness of day-to-day operations, things can drop off pretty easily. With the agreement of councillors by majority, if you're happy to keep it in there with a notation that simply says it's not an expectation to deliver it this year because of funding. Councillors happy enough with that? Councillor Carl?
Just a question. And
it's on that same subject, yeah.
And with the greatest of respect, I mean, I'm a little bit puzzled as to, I guess my first question is, if we're going to push resources into the Christmas lights and it's in the same department under the same manager, then what are we actually taking away from an important project in the City Centre Master Plan? I'm a little bit, why are we putting something else in and we're going to put a notation against that one that, you know, there's actually going to be no work. I'm not saying deliver complete, but there's going to be no work done on that because they'll be distracted away on putting some pretty lights up in the CBD.
Councillor Carl, the pilot for a CBD lights is if it can be managed in conjunction with the Christmas lights that council already puts up. So in that space, we would actually be working with the operational areas of council to deliver something at Christmas time rather than necessary. Yeah. Whereas the other component of the action is to formalise a longer-term strategy for council about lighting in the CBD, which is about the nighttime economy, about bringing people in, and it's a longer-term project. And similarly with the City Centre Master Plan, we've reached a position where we've achieved a lot over the last 10 years, particularly in terms of the delivery of the works that council committed to undertaking as part of the implementation plan. That next phase of the action plan does require significant internal liaison and work around what those next set of actions will be, and understanding the opportunities and resource requirements, including future budget initiatives that might sit within that. So that is a significant chunk of work. Appreciate that it still requires that same area, but it would be more around the working with operational areas to deliver rather than the branch potentially delivering themselves.
So it still takes an amount of coordination. Well, I guess I think something is better than nothing, and if we're talking about, you know, economic development and bringing people to the city centre, well, you know, like, you've only got to read the definition under the City Centre Master Plan stuff. It makes it pretty important as an anchor piece of work, something. We were all commenting, or not all, I will measure that comment. A number of us were commenting about how difficult things are in prioritisation earlier this morning, and something gets put in, albeit an operational, but it's still resource, it's still an addition to operation. I'm puzzled. I think we should keep it in there, absolutely, but I also think we should actually keep vigilant about how we step through the next phases, and even if that's a bit of something rather than nothing, and a notation saying, well, it's there, but we're not going to do anything. You know.
Well, I think I'll hand over to Nicola. I think the benefit of keeping it in there is also that there could be some savings or opportunity through the year, which enables it to happen. And if it's not on that list, it may be forgotten about. And I think
Yeah.
that's the other advantage.
I merely
Nicola,
ra-
would you
I-
like to?
I merely raised the point that it's in the same department, managed by the same manager in it. I think one of the general managers used the word distraction before. Sorry, but if you spread people too thin on staff, then it pulls us away from those anchor pieces of work in core priorities that stimulate lots of other things.
Yeah, no, good point. But you're in favour of us keeping it in there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd really like us to not just put a cross against it and say, oh, we're not going to do anything. In the context of adding other stuff in.
Nicola, would you like to make a comment? And then if it's on the same subject, Councillor Carroll, I'll go to you before I go to Councillor Melissa.
Exactly the same.
It's not, so well, I'll go to Councillor Melissa first. Sorry, Councillor Rebecca, then Melissa, and then Councillor Carroll. And Nicola, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. On a general basis, it may be worth looking at the key themes that, excuse me, do emerge in these data. And that is that, in general, where as a portfolio we haven't met, either completed an action or have not yet met the 85%, it's predominantly because either a project wasn't funded in the budget or because of the timing of this particular report, so it may be too early in the project for us to have achieved enough within that project. Or the third factor is the vacancy rates. So essentially they're the three themes that do emerge from this data, and then that's reflected in those action items as well.
Thanks. On that same subject, Councillor Carroll?
Yes, it is, Mr Chair.
Okay.
I see online on page 126, the Toowoomba Railway Goods Shed business plan and business case. Now, we've had a stranded asset down there for years. Was always intended to put a kitchen in there. Several groups...
Councillor Carroll, we will hold that one because I know it's in the centre, but it is a different item, so we'll leave that go. And Councillor Rebecca, we'll go to... No, we'll go to Councillor Rebecca, then Councillor Melissa, and then back to you, Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually about, my second question was about that Toowoomba Railway Goods Shed business plan and business case. So again, it's been, the request for change is for it to be removed because the project wasn't funded in the budget. And just below it, there's the proposed insertion of City Deal's quarterly progress report. And I just think we need to talk a little bit more about this because in my reading, they are distinct things, and arguably we can have both and it shouldn't be an either or. I wonder, I know that the funding fell away for the parklands, but this seems to have predated that decision. So I'm just a bit confused about what we're doing because this is a really important one. We're talking about commercial investment in key strategic sites, and we often talk about the need to have locations where we can attract large-scale events, and yet we're proposing that we eliminate something that really speaks to that from the OP plan. Understanding it hasn't been budgeted again, I would still like to keep it in there so that we can keep an eye on it and budget it and prioritise it next year potentially. I'm not opposed to the idea of inserting the City Deal's quarterly progress report because that is great, no objection there, but I do think that they're distinctive things and we need to understand what we're doing and why we'd take it out.
So the City Deals is an additional milestone, separate from that. I know there's linkages now because of that announcement. However, once again, I don't have an issue with keeping it in there. If opportunity comes up to fund it through the year, at least it's there and known about. Do any councillors have a dissenting view on that? Councillor Tim?
Just quickly, Chair, I was under the impression that Toowoomba Railway Goods Shed was part of City Deals and therefore would be included under that milestone anyway. No? Incorrect?
If I may, Chair, Council received funding as part of the transfer of land and the restoration of the goods shed, so a number of years, and that was completed some time ago. The foundation funding for the city deals was more around the advancement of the parkland, was what was initially put forward. In terms of funding, that funding still exists. What is under debate at the moment for the implementation plan is how that funding is directed to the Railway Parklands PDA area and the expectations of other levels of government in that space. So that's a matter that officers are still working through and briefing upwards as that occurs. But the goods shed itself is not linked to the city deals funding, but it sits within the Railway Parklands area, so as part of that broader concept.
Okay with that. Councillor Antonio?
In respect to the city deals funding, I think there's been a major change in recent times, hasn't there? It's being directed more towards housing, and the PDA area has virtually been taken off the list at this point. My understanding, Michelle, that's...
Yes, Mayor, there is some talk that particularly as a result of the federal government's prioritisation towards housing, that is an area that they are looking at, but at this point in time, the implementation plan hasn't been finalised, and we're still yet to get across the final piece of work in detail, and as that happens, we will bring that back to Council to discuss what that means and what the impacts of that are.
Oops. Thanks, Michelle. So, is there any dissenting view of leaving that in there, though, in the councillors? If there's no dissenting view, we can put that back in there. Councillor Carroll, this is the same subject now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I do want to ask councillors to have a look at this. This is the biggest venue in town, and people have tried to use it for functions and found they can't because it has no kitchen. And, you know, it's kind of there, and it's a beautiful venue. It cost us, we got $5 million for a project that cost us about 12.5, I think. So at the end of the day, you know, whilst we're very grateful for that, a lot of council resources went in. Then they had to put a new roof on it because there was asbestos up there. But this is a large venue that is really not being used to its capacity because it hasn't got a kitchen. They've had the Disability Awards were there. It was beautiful. They were all set, but the food was cold. So they can't make it work for a large sit-down function. And I think that's and we've jumped over to Quarry Gardens and we jumped somewhere else. But you know, we've got that there, and it's usable, and it's a beautiful building. A lot of work has gone into it, and I think it should be really thought about as being one of our priorities. And I'm very disappointed to hear I wasn't aware of what might happen to Railway Parklands because, you know, I mean, if you're going to have housing in the city centre, you need to have amenity, and those parklands to provide amenity to the PDA was something that I thought was going to be there. So I'm really disappointed to think that that may have changed when our community's been promised that, and it wasn't a pre-election promise, it was quite some time before. So I think that politics is pretty much on the nose at times, but I would encourage my colleagues, that beautiful building, historic building in the middle of our city CBD needs to be made usable, and we need to look at putting a kitchen and whatever's necessary in there and not leave it sitting there stranded.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. So, the summary is we leave that in the operational plan. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. We've got a few lined up actually. So we've covered off on Councillor Carroll on the same subject. So Councillor Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a completely different subject, but on the same page of Board Books 161 or 123 of 144. So Councillor Carl, Councillor Summerfield and I were at Oakey Chamber of Commerce last night to their meeting, and there was a question about National Tree Day and the planting, and I note here that it's got Council celebrated National Tree Planting Day at 3 parks On the 3rd of September, Council has requested a report relating to tree planting options for future consideration. So can I know it's more of a national tree planting day, it's not just council, but how are the parks picked or the areas selected? Because that was one of the questions of one of the members of the Oakey Chamber last night, was how to get involved, and she was very keen, wasn't she? Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Michelle, you have a...
Yes,
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, the action is actually reporting on the achievements under the Green Infrastructure Plan, and that's a plan that's been endorsed by Council at a high-level strategic, at a strategic level. And this action actually reports not just on the achievements of strategic planning and economic development, but other areas of council where they're contributing to this strategy. So it's more of a reporting mechanism. I would have to take that information on notice and ask the area of parks who were responsible for delivering that national planting strategy, the National Tree Planting Day in those three parks as to why, unless General Manager President has any additional information at this point in time. Otherwise, we can bring that back to you or circulate some information. And in relation to the tree planting strategy, that is one of the resolutions of council made this year to look at the 1 million trees. It is something that we have on action. We've now had, since the adoption of the budget, I think we've totted up 3 to 4 resolutions that have been passed by council that have impacts on resourcing to deliver on those resolutions that were not part of our original work program when the operational plan was adopted, and were not resourced or budgeted. So we are working through those to try and come back to you in a reasonable manner, bearing in mind that it was not something that was part of our work program, and taking into account that our core focus has been the decisions of council, which are to deliver on Toowoomba Futures, the 3 strategic programs under that, and a core component of that work is council's position on environment in relation to land use and environment strategy in that space. However, there are a number of other areas that start to step into operational matters as well, and we are happy to support that and to help coordinate that information coming back to council. But I just want to highlight to you today that those are in addition to the work planned that we had, and with with staff vacancies at the moment, it is quite a challenge. If I may also add a silver lining to some of those challenges in terms of the resourcing, is that we have been able to go out with the support of Finance and Business Strategy to a local recruitment firm. Our first 5 positions closed earlier this week. I'm pleased to report that we have had multiple applicants for those positions. However, it is difficult. There are fewer for the senior positions, and that is a gap that I think many people, thank you, are experiencing. Thank you. And the final thing, while I have the opportunity, is to also say that we have used this as an opportunity, despite the difficult circumstances, excuse me, my voice is really cracky, to look at how our talent is best positioned to respond to the current and emerging risks and the priorities of council. And as a result of that, we have made some changes to our structure and our recruiting in that way. And some of those have been to reshape and reform those positions. We have been able to consolidate some of those functions. We have been able to, through those savings, identify where we can uplift some of those positions to perhaps attract more experienced people. And we have created some new positions that will help us transition and mature as we need to. So I'm confident that we have a plan moving forward, but there is always the hurdle to get over, and that's been echoed here this morning around the challenges of recruitment.
Okay, so back onto your trees, we'll get an answer on where those parks may be, but there could be expressions of interest perhaps for communities, might be something that Nick takes on. Now, I've got Councillor Tim, Councillor Megan, Councillor Nancy. That subject we're just touching on there, that Michelle, have you got another? No, that Michelle was talking about there. Has that raised any other questions, Councillor Nancy, on that particular subject?
Thank you, Chair. So really, I guess we just need to know if Oakey can plant some trees on National Tree Day is probably the answer we're wanting, and maybe we're asking the wrong person, that it should be Parks and through Nick. But that's the answer that we're wanting. That's all. Quite easy.
Yeah, so we've taken that on board through Nick, and he'll get back to us in due course with an answer on how that process gets undertaken. Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Chair. Won't take up a lot of time, but I am familiar with the structures of Tree Planting Day. It's not a free-for-all, and it's done in line with the park strategy and where we're upgrading the parks. I have had some conversations. There was some planting done in the main street of Oakey, a year or so ago, and the community was not happy with it. And around getting, obviously the logistics and the insurance of having 100 people running around a main street doing a public tree planting is something that needs to be looked at in that department. But I have certainly pathwayed the idea that we need a tree planting day in Oakey, and the community is very keen. So thanks for bringing that up. There is a few plans happening behind the scenes, but it's not a just pick your spot and go for it kind of a. It's quite structured. Yeah.
Thank you for the update, Councillor McMahon. The angst of the community last night was quite palpable about the main street of Oakey, and also the railway area, which I know is QR, but there's also a strip of land which is council, and there's quite a lot of frustration. But Tony was there last night to deliver some communication about where we are with that. But yes, there's quite a deal of frustration, and they just want to plant some petunias for Christmas. But it's the community just are desperate for something.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up, Mel.
That's great. Appreciate that. Councillor Megan.
Mr. Chair, I put my hand up when Michelle started to speak about the that mention there of the tree planting options for future considerations. That I thought that was in reference to my 1 million tree planting option, and I thank you, and I sort of apologise at the same time. Yes, not, but about loading you up with a whole lot of more work. But in the big scheme of things, I think that those sorts of things are what the community at our level are definitely crying out for. And at the time we talked about balancing the ledger, when we've got clearing, and so, how are we going to plant more trees?
Well, the green, and it ties in with the green infrastructure, I'd suggest as well, somewhere along the line. So thank you. But no more questions for planning. Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate your answers. Councillors, we've got one more area, that's water and waste services, and I propose we adjourn following that, just for a break for 10 minutes. So welcome to General Manager Platts. Thank you, Damien. Again, I offer my seat there for you if you'd like to use it with your literature. Councillors, are there any questions? We'll take this as read. Any questions for the General Manager of Water and Waste? Given a whole lot of green ticks and only one red from memory. Councillor Nancy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Damien. Just in relation, on the first page, page 170, 6894, positively influence organisational culture through active participation, blah, blah, blah. And the performance comments are staff awards being planned, expressions of interest for temporary vacancies filled internally, CEO Roadshow, Mount Kynoch Project and FMBS Awards, Pittsworth. Could you just elaborate on those comments and help me understand how all of those things reflect on positively influencing the culture within your department, please?
Councillors, thank you and good morning. Those are occasions where we actually, as GMs, get out into the community and out to see our staff. So the Pittsworth was the Safety Awards. It wasn't the FMBS Awards, but I was at the FMBS Awards and I was at the Planning Development Awards, and we, as GMs, try to go and break down, not
make ourselves available to other groups and staff. So that certainly is what happened at Pittsworth, and I was there the night before, caught up with a few people over dinner, and then there very early in the morning for a breakfast with what is mostly an ISG group. So that's they're examples of when I was out seeing the staff.
Thank you very much, General Manager. Councillors, any other questions for General Manager of Water and Waste? Be there no more questions, thank you, Damien. Very much appreciated. Troy, would you like to summarise before we move to the motion?
Through you, Chair. I think we'll have to change that recommendation in relation to the exceptions of Action 02616 and Milestone 6925, which we are not removing in those requests for changes.
Right, well, we'll do that. We'll make that notation. So they were the two items that were in the request for change.
Correct.
That are now not requests for change. So you might just read those a little bit more slowly, or Kirsten, are you okay with those numbers? Could you just read them a little more slowly, Troy, if you could? Thanks.
Action 02616 and Milestone M06923.
Yeah, we'll just wordsmith that before next Tuesday, but that's effectively the intent, is to ensure that they stay in as they are. So, councillors, that's the motion there before you, albeit there will be a little bit more wordsmithing of the second part to that motion. Can I have someone move that we accept the committee recommendation? Moved by Councillor Megan, seconded by Councillor Kerry. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Could I have someone move to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Councillor Antonio, seconded by Councillor McMahon, for 10 minutes. So we'll return at 11:25. 11:25. Those in favour? Good. Let's go. Right, mate. Okay, Kirsten, we're right to go. Councillors will resume Finance and Business Strategy Group. We move to item number 5, which is the controlled entities. We've got Andrew Wegener here, the Manager of Financial Services. We also have Sasha at the back. Sasha, thank you for coming along today, a financial accountant, as well as Thon, who, between the two of them, work very closely with our controlled entities. And I have to say, from the outset, the reporting of controlled entities has been refreshing over the last couple of reporting periods because of the close connection that you're having with the controlled entity. So we certainly thank you very much for that indeed. So I might hand over to Anne-Marie, who will then introduce Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, councillors, in the interest of transparency, this report is provided. It includes financial information and activity details for each of council's controlled entities. It's provided to you now on a quarterly basis and provided for noting purposes. So happy to hand over to Andrew, who will take any questions.
Andrew, would you like to make any commentary first before we go to questions?
Thank you, Chair. No, I'll take the report as read at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Councillor, is there any questions in regard to either or any of the reports? Councillor Nancy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Andrew. So I just wanted to say big congratulations to the Empire Theatre for their great attendance numbers in that report. It's fantastic the way their numbers are going up, which means that the community is really getting back engaged in enjoying a bit of culture in their lives. But just in relation to John Dairy and Woolshed, I recall we requested that there be ongoing, and I know that it's currently won't be a separate entity as such, but that we continue to be able to oversee or keep an eye on the financial updates in relation to it, and in particular the events, profit and loss of the events that are held out there. I was out at one on Friday night for St Anne's Guild, and the Woolshed and the grounds were looking fantastic. The community everybody provided positive feedback of what council is actually doing out there. They're really happy with the way the grounds are being kept, and that the Woolshed is in such good shape now. So there's really good contentment out there, but we need to also be able to keep an eye on what it's costing council and progressing forward. And also the caravan park, and I know we're still working through the stages of it, but I really still can't understand why that caravan park isn't open and getting some money in, because there's great potential there. And if they're not there, they're getting it for free at the Bowenville Reserve, which of course we want that changed as well, that it shouldn't be for free. So if we can continue to have oversight of the John Dairy and Woolshed moving forward, possibly in a different format, because these are for the entities, but that we continue to see John Dairy and Woolshed figures, if we could, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take that one on notice and provide that reporting.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
And if you could please pass on thanks, certainly from me, and I'm sure everybody around the table, for the great work that is being done out there, and the collaboration with the locals and the volunteers and our staff. And I think, that's headed up by Robert Campbell, who does a great job wherever he goes. And I just think that thanks needs to be acknowledged. Thank you.
Brilliant. So we'll pass that perhaps through to Nick, through the property area. Councillor Shine, a question?
No, thanks, Chair. Just might I seek your indulgence to, while we're on the Empire Theatre, to acknowledge the work done by the Empire Theatre Trust in terms of the granting of bursaries to young people. I had the pleasure last evening of attending the awards, the annual awards. There was a record amount being spent by the Trust on a record number of young senior school students who are there and received those awards last night. Could I acknowledge, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge the sponsors who, in a big part made it possible. They were Downlands College, Clifford Gilson Lawyers, Shine Private, Greenridge Group, Horizon Accounting Group, DP Wealth Advisory, and Burnoff Properties. These awards have been were originated in 2003, and many young talented Toowoombawites have benefited greatly from that in starting careers in acting and dancing. So in all walks of life, it has been a great start for them and a tremendous initiative. So I think Toowoomba can look forward to having future stars like Jeffrey Rush as a result of the Empire Theatre Trust. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sean. I'll take that as a comment. So that was the Empire Theatre's Foundation Youth Bursaries last evening. So thank you for that. Another great initiative. By Anne-Marie. Yeah, Anne-Marie was a critical part of that early on. So thank you. Any other questions in regard to the controlled entities, councillors? Councillor Rebecca? Okay, but there are no further questions. The recommendations there before you. The council note quarterly reports as at the 30th September for its controlled entities, Empire Theatres, PTO Ltd and Toowoomba Surat Basin Enterprise, PTO Ltd, together with progress updates of the John Deere and Woolshed, PTO Ltd wind up, and Empire Theatres Foundation Limited. Do I have a mover for the motion? Moved by Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. Those in favour? That motion's carried. We move now to item number 6, councillors, and again acknowledge the presence of Andrew and his small but dedicated team. This is around the annual financial statements and final notes for council and its controlled entities. And I'll before I hand over to Anne-Marie, I just wanted to pay tribute to you, Anne-Marie, and the team in regard to the close working relationship, professional working relationship that you have with QAO. We see that, Councillor Shine and myself and those that attend our audit committee meetings, that between our internal audit with JP and the external audit, it's a very solid, open, transparent working relationship for the benefit of our community. But I just want to acknowledge that from the start, because to have unmodified reports on each area is a credit to everyone involved. So hand over to you, Anne-Marie, to make some comments.
Thank you, Chair. So Council, just you might be wondering why you're getting the financial statements again when we've just adopted the annual report at the October ordinary meeting. So the annual report included consolidated financial statements for Council and its controlled entities. So the purpose of this report today is to present the separate financial statements for each of those entities and the Queensland Audit Office final management letters. So these documents are tabled on a request from the Queensland Audit Office. At the first available opportunity, we present these documents to you. Council's own final management letter includes ICT internal control issues. Those issues will be addressed as a separate report to next week's ordinary meeting. So I know councillors have raised some concerns around those issues previously. So we've got a report coming next week that will address those. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Questions, councillors? No questions. There's a recommendation for noting the certified financial statements and final management letters for council and the control entities. That's a recommendation. I have a mover, moved by Councillor Melissa. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Megan. Those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, that concludes the Finance and Business Strategy Group Committee for November. I hand over now to the Mayor for the Economic Development. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
I was just looking for the GM in planning and her staff who were outside a moment ago. Are they coming? That's great. Presenting this. Kate is presenting. Yeah, and who's the other? Who's Andrew? Was there another person presenting as well? I don't know. Come down. Is Kate on the way or?
Adam and Kate are both on their way.
Adam. Councillors, I'll just wait a moment. Adam and Kate are just about here, I think. Might have seen Adam come in the door just then and turned around again. Right, Kirsten, you're right to go whenever you're ready. Yeah. Better not start before they turn up. Councillors Adam and Kate have arrived, so I think we'll probably begin the meeting. Can I welcome you to the Economic Development Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. Meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I would particularly like to thank all of those in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching Council's social media channels. Can I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guybil, the Jarrawa and the Bigambul peoples, and can I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's first people. No apologies and we'll now, are there any declarations that anyone wishes to make in respect to this? If there's not, we will move immediately to item 3, which is the temporary economic development incentives for medium density residential development policy. And to start that off, I'll hand over to Adam, and then I think, Kate, you're going to have a major input in it too. Adam, do you wish to say anything at the start? Or? Okay, over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much.
Turn it on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, councillors. Today, as directed by Council, I'm bringing forward a draft policy for the temporary economic development incentives of medium mid-density residential development for adoption by Council. This is in line with Council's decision at the ordinary meeting of June 23rd. Under the proposed policy, infrastructure charges applicable to medium density development will be reduced by 70% for new development approvals, 40% for existing approvals, and 30% for dual occupancies for a period not exceeding 24 months or until a cap of $3.5 million has been reached. This will be applicable from the 23rd of June 2022 when the resolution was made. The policy has been drafted under a similar framework to our existing suite of policies, and it has been externally reviewed by a solicitor to ensure that risks have been adequately addressed. Thank you. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Kate? Or for Councillor Summerfield and Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kate. Kate, I just wonder, would you mind just going through those 5 dot points and explaining them more to me? Because number 1, as I read it, is only for multiple or dual occupancy developments. And I'd really just like to, if we could just go through those 5 so that I can, you know, because we're going to get queries and I just want to have it in my head just exactly what examples I can use for people. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
So number 1, a properly made development application is made for a development permit for a material change of use for multiple dwelling or building works approval for a dual occupancy, and the resulting approval is in effect. So multiple dwellings typically that's any more than 2 units, and high rises, etc. And then the dual occupancies, they actually don't come through planning approval, so that's where the building approval criteria is picked up. Council has issued an ICN in relation to the development approval, but the use has not.
Sorry, can I just ask a question there? On the dual occupancies, because we had a lot of trouble with them out in the regions, that was decided in some form to limit them to X numbers. Can you just explain that is still there? And thank you very much. Through you to Adam, thanks. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Back to you, Kate. Adam.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so none of those rules are changed in any way. So while a large percentage of our dual occupancies don't get a planning approval, or if they do trigger, you know, the so many on the street and all that sort of stuff, then they still have to have a planning approval and seek the normal. So none of that has changed.
But we have a limit on how many can be together in one street, because it has changed communities out there when it was open slather. Thank you. That gives me great comfort. Thanks.
Councillor, I had Councillor McDonald and Councillor Summerfield. You're right.
Mayor, I believe this will be all on the same subject, wouldn't it? Because you're working through the 5 dot points.
Sorry,
I'm
Councillor.
quite happy to hold my questions.
Yeah, back to you, Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you. So I'm trying to work out what it means. So say you've got an acre of land that's going to be developed up. They're not all multiple dwellings, so they would be a mixture of dwellings. Is that right? Am I looking at this right? I just don't. I need to understand it, and I don't. So I just need to understand if it's for multiple dwellings only. How does that work when you've got a block of land that you're going to cut up into? Or am I looking at it the wrong way? I don't know. Planning does my head in.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So are you meaning a subdivision, or you meaning, so a subdivision wouldn't have qualified for this, but any subsequent, so say you have a subdivision and it's 50 lots, and then one of those lots, whoever buys it decides to a duplex or a set of townhouses, then they would qualify for this, but the subdivider themselves was never, and that was never in the resolution that directed us. Do you recollect that on the 23rd of June, there was a resolution for the medium density discounts, and it was really targeted at duplexes and multiple dwellings, and not residential subdivisions.
So really, if there was, if you'll indulge me further, really if there was a block of land that's sitting there vacant at the moment that someone's waiting for someone to pay an extraordinary amount of money for, and they put multiple dwellings on it, that would be approved. But when it comes to a subdivision, it's not.
No.
Okay, so are we happy to be limiting it to that? Is probably my question.
Oh yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair. Yep. Just to put out there that the operational works discounts still apply to the RALs, so they do have some incentives, but it's not through this particular policy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You finished, Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you.
Councillor Cole?
Yeah, just on this, I can give a layperson's explanation of why we focused on the lot after the sale of, the subdivision, is because we wanted a more even distribution of those incentives to go across the community, i.e. the building sector, and therefore it lands, it's a more even distribution, and the principal developer didn't just pocket that incentive and not pass it on potentially to the person that purchases the land and ultimately builds the thing. So we wanted, the purpose behind it was to see as much as possible the medium density development materialise on the ground. That's why it was focused at that level, because potentially it could be not passed on down the chain. So that's why we did it that way. Is that correct, Adam? Yep.
Any further comments around the room? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. But just to add to Councillor Carl's, and it says it in the report there, to try and stimulate those ones that are already in the system. What's the barrier to them not bringing them on? Yeah.
Councillor Shine?
Just a clarification, I think on the same point, that the background says that there were 80 current approvals consisting of approximately 500 dwelling units, meaning building units. And this is the reason to try and activate them. Are you aware whether or not any other councils have adopted a similar policy and the results of that policy? You may not be aware.
No, I'm not aware, although I think some of the more rural councils have adopted a more widespread no charge. Western Downs. Yeah.
And I think that related to the energy boom out there in Chinchilla.
But there is another one, and I can't remember, but just recently I read about it. So.
Yeah. It's, pardon me butting in, but it's very interesting that this, and I'm certainly very happy about the incentives and very happy about getting as much done as we can to build houses. But the Council of Mayors in South East Queensland are advocating for a complete change. Moreton Bay believe that it's cost them around about $75,000 to get the enabling infrastructure per block for a development. So there's some discussion going on. And can I add to that the fact that the Assistant Minister for Local Government is coming to Toowoomba on the 25th or the 24th, I think, the lady we met up in Cairns, and that might be an opportunity for us to have a conversation about a range of things in regard to a local government. It doesn't necessarily relate to exactly what we're doing now, but it's a good contact to have. Anybody else? Councillor McMahon.
Chair, thanks. Just a quick question. Kate, as I read it, number 2, we've issued the ICN, charges not been paid, and then you have to have the building completed after 23rd of June. So, are we under any rush to get this are there people who are, I know 23rd of June was some months ago, but are there people who are waiting for this to be finalised before they complete their building, or?
We have had a through you, Chair. We have had a limited number of inquiries in relation to this policy, and we have not been able to give any certainty outside of the resolution. So pending on the adoption today, we'll be going back and notifying those persons of the outcome and the fact that the policy is now
So
standing.
there's not thousands of them waiting till the right time. Thank you for that.
Councillor Von Hoff and then sorry, you wish to add to that question?
May I just ask Kate just to put the microphone closer to her mouth because it's a little bit hard to hear. Thanks.
Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you. Can we just confirm my understanding, big picture of this is council takes a $3.5 million financial hit and gets 500 up to 500 of the medium density places on the market sooner. That's the exchange.
Essentially, so with those existing approvals, they're currently sitting under a potential 40% discount on those infrastructure charges. And if they're already existing, we've already levied that charge. So there is also potential that a lot of those developments have come in and paid the charge, and they'll no longer be able to capitalise on the incentive. Where we're taking, with the $3.5 million cap, we do have a lot of caps across our current policy suite, and it's very seldom that we actually approach that cap.
Okay.
So it's just a risk mitigation strategy and a mechanism for council.
Yep.
And can I just add to that, that this is not only for existing approvals also, that there's, through some of the other numbers that we never got a chance to read out, if someone comes in with a new approval, then they qualify for the 70% funding if they're a multi-res. So it could enable more units than just those initial 500.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McMahon, you had your hand up before? You're right, thanks. Councillor Shine.
Just as a matter of interest, the Brisbane Housing Company's project for Station Street, I don't know whether that being state government pays infrastructure charges at all, but if it did, would it qualify for this?
I'm not aware of the development at Station Street, but if it is under a state, we don't levy an infrastructure charge.
It may not be quick enough because it would have to be complete by June 2024. So, yeah. And depending on which way it goes, whether it's done as a community residence or multiple dwelling, if it's a multiple dwelling and they had to pay, then they would have to, and they would qualify. But if it's done as community residence, then they wouldn't. So,
And I'd imagine if we wished to support it support a particular development like that, that decision can be made collectively by council. I'd imagine. Councillor Carroll. Schools don't, that's for sure. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment that, I welcome the work that you guys have done on this and the former General Manager, Stuart Summers, because, you incentivise things to get something happening. And so we know we've got a housing crisis. This is a possibility of getting particularly A, housing choice, but B, multiple dwellings, we know, then go into the rental market, or 50% they say goes into the rental market. So anything that we can do that might, in a sensible way, bring on that that start. I mean, there's always a problem with people, you can't get builders, you can't get stuff, but I mean, this is a commitment by council to show our willingness to do what we can. What is happening with the discount on the operational works? Is that hasn't come, has it? It is to come, or it has?
it was applied through the last resolution, and it didn't need to come back to this forum. So it has been, since the 23rd of June, it has been being applied.
Any feedback on that or any
It's funny, I looked at the numbers last week, and even though we've applied a 50% discount, we're actually still ahead on our budgets because we've had so much
volume
coming in, and because building costs have escalated so much, and the fee being based on cost of works, each subdivision is paying a lot more before the 50% discount. So we've ended up, as a council, we've ended up in front at this point so far to the year, even though we've applied a 50% discount. So on what we would have expected for this time.
Okay. And then just the last thing is this will go out as an announcement on the, what's the thing called? I can't remember the name of it. Is it not PD? Oh, yeah, PD Alerts. That's it. I was thinking PD Online, but yeah, that after next Tuesday, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that there'll be media on this as well, I'm assuming. So.
Thank you.
Of course, it could bring forward 500 blocks of land at at least $2,500 a year in rates, and that's another financial factor that. And I just thank Michelle and Nicola for letting me know when those rates begin. They begin when the house is built. So, you know, there's a bring forward there. Councillor McDonald, you were about to say something?
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Mayor, I do, but I'll just probably revert back to Councillor Summerfield if you're still wanting to work through those 5 points. We got to 1 and then we got diverted about 44 times. So I just wonder whether, if there are more questions you had on that before I ask mine?
We got to 2, we got down through 2. I think we've pretty well covered it through the various discussions that we've had, unless someone else has got queries around. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So,
okay, thank you.
Ask mine. Thanks.
Is there any other questions anyone wishes to ask? Because the recommendation is that Council adopt the temporary economic development incentives for medium density residential policy attachment 1. Councillor O'Sullivan has moved. Councillor,
I've got a question. I've actually got a couple of questions. Sorry about that. I'm confusing their situation clearly.
Well, I thought we'd cleared the questions, but I'd made a mistake. So
yeah, no,
we have a mover. Councillor Carl has seconded that.
Yeah, right.
And I'll take that as a mover and a seconder. But if you wish to ask a question, I think I'll break the rules and let you ask it.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mayor, for your indulgence. If we can go to page 413 of the policy, I'm just wondering, you know, it's like those puzzles where you see what's different to the next one, but the development permit for dual occupancy is listed one underneath each other, and they look identical to me, and probably for good reason. There's probably nothing different about them. But could they be combined as one if there is no difference?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for picking up on that. That happened north of my team, so we'll move back and we'll take that back out. I don't know how it got there, in honesty. So
No, I might have accidentally done that when I was loading it in Resolve, so it's my apologies.
Good on you, Adam, owning up.
We don't take confessions in this room. If it's appropriate, let's do it.
Truth be told, I went through it half a dozen times because I thought, you know, I've obviously missed a word here that's different. So that was the first one. The second one is on the next page, and it refers to the exclusions. So 5.2, and it seems, in my mind, it's contrary to the previous mention. So we say where applicable infrastructure charges have been paid prior to the date of adoption of this policy, yet previously in item number, I think it's 3.2.2, it talks about the 23rd of June 2022, and I just wondered whether that should change to say 23rd of June, or am I reading that incorrectly?
no, you're correct again on that one. We will honour that change and in fact remove completely the date or any reference and just state infrastructure charges have not been paid in the exclusion.
Okay, thank you, Kate, and thanks very much for that. The other point, nothing to do with the policy changes, just a commentary if I could. Given, and there's good reasons why we have a 70% for new and the 40%, 30%, is it 40% for old. through you, Mayor, through to Nicola and perhaps to Kate and Adam, given the numbers that we have, they're already in the system, that haven't been paid, say, whatever percentage that is, that'll be eligible for 40% because they're old. Is there a tipping point of the numbers of dwellings that would make it beneficial for them to reapply with a new application and receive 70%?
It is possible, but obviously they're going to look at it from a financial means that they've got to make a change application, pay consultants to prepare that, have some uncertainty around in the timing and risks associated as well. So people may weigh that up and go, well, I've got to then be assessed against some of the new items in the scheme, which they might have to change their development substantially to alter that. So it's possible, but I guess they're going to have to weigh that up in terms of their business. You know.
I guess it's just an observation. You know, there might be 8 units or something that might be the tipping point between someone saying, well, we'll reapply and get 70% rather than stick with what we've got at 40%. It may also encourage better design, perhaps, by having that 70%. And I think that's one of the upsides or opportunities for some of the developments that may be in there. That's why I'm quite happy with the 70 and 40, that difference. And I think, Councillor Carl, in the info session, you're the one that raised that difference to make sure it is attractive enough to have a change and bring it up to speed or not. So I was just wondering what that tipping point might be, but each project would be treated on its merits, I assume. So that's all the questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Carl, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, no question. Just on that very point, through you, Adam, I thought we actually were, the specific reason why we had the 23rd of June in there was to mitigate that tail of uncompleted, given the climate and the lengthy period it takes to realise something out of the ground. That's why I think we had that 23rd of June. So I'm a little bit cautious that we would take that out. It's in the policy here.
Yeah.
So are you talking about taking it out? Right.
I'm saying it's got to be, it's contrary.
Oh, right.
The second part's contrary to the first part. So it's just got to be consistent.
Clarifying.
Fine.
Are there any other comments or questions around the room? Moved by Councillor O'Hara Sutherland, second by Councillor Carl. The motion is before you there. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? If not, I'll put the vote. Those in favour? Carried without dissent. That closes the meeting, councillors. We have a 1 o'clock with the police are coming in to give us an understanding of the new security measures they're putting on in regard to cars. Sort of thing. Thanks very much.
Hey, Brian, can I just bring something up before we go for lunch? Yeah. Brian, I don't know about the other councillors, but I just find that whole sort of setup really hard. Like, we can't see you, we can't see anyone's behind the computer. I don't know what we can do. It's just, I think it's awful. You can't see people's faces.
Seconded. I can only see your head.
What do you think? It's the computers, it's the screens, yeah.
I can see that side well, but I can't see anyone sitting there